Welcome to the My Rules Are Better podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. This was going to be a very interesting recording. I mean, it was going to be a very interesting recording, and it just became a lot more interesting. Some very curious twist. I really didn't have that much to report over the past week. So this whole crisis thing has meant that I'm just basically working more hours in more kind of fixed, regimented fashion. And it has eliminated almost every aspect of my free time. Now, I am slowly but surely working through my podcasting room. My podcasting table is now almost clear. I have been able to film some YouTube videos, which you will have seen. But in general, my time is so totally devoted to work and monitoring things at work. That being said, last week was my 18th wedding anniversary. This year, obviously, the circumstances are very different. So my wife and I decided that we would get each other relatively frivolous gifts. There's no real importance in this podcast talking about what I got my wife, but what my wife got me was rather interesting. Now, last recording, I think, or maybe the recording before, I talked about Matthew Gibson's interest in Napoleonics and doing Napoleonics with paper. I feel somewhere through these recordings, because they've been relatively voluminous and intimate, that I've probably talked about my views with regards to the Napoleonic period at some stage. That it is of limited interest to me, that it's kind of curious, banks of men lining up, shooting at each other, moving in squared formations, all these kind of things, which ultimately lend themselves to the kind of massacres that you see in the American Civil War, aspects of the First World War, that basically tactics needed to change based on rifles. And as they didn't change through the Napoleonic period, they just followed some rigid military formation. It just didn't strike me as a period that I could get into in any way, shape or form. And although I've enjoyed certain aspects of, and here it's also the post-Napoleonics as well, the whole thing for me just seemed rather strange and curious. Now, I've enjoyed a couple of films. I like The Duelists. I think it's an amazing film. There's a film, its name escapes me, that also has, some Napoleonic fighting in it. So I've watched a couple of films where it's just like, oh, this is interesting, of the period. But really, personally, and in miniature form, I might have joked about this previously, the only Napoleonic figure I have is one that was given to me as a gift with a pile of other figures that I included in a figure case that a figure painter painted for me. So I have one British Napoleonic figure that was painted for me accordingly. Well, then comes my wife's gift to me for my 18th wedding anniversary. And for my 18th wedding anniversary, my wife gave me a series of medals from Lieutenant General Charles Joseph Pierre Pletinckx. Now, he was born in 1797 and died in 1877. And when he was 18, he was at Waterloo and he won an award. He was a 8th Hussar, which means guy on horseback with a sword, basically. He captured a cannon at Waterloo. And that was the trajectory of his life from there. He then became very heavily involved with the Red Cross. Actually, first he was part of the Belgian War of Independence. Then he was heavily involved with the Red Cross. And he went to, as a much older man, be an ambulance, a field ambulance commander in the Franco-Prussian War, which is 1870 to 1871. So by that point, he's a very old man. And he got awards from both sides for his work in the ambulance, for his leadership of the field ambulance. And through, obviously, the Belgian independence and also Leopold I, Leopold II, he's part of a whole lot of political intrigue as well. And I found this out because his autobiography is available online in French. So I've been paragraph by paragraph Google translating the French. Now, although I read French, it's nice to have it in English as well. So I've been Google translating through the French, and I miss some of the nuances. I mean, let's be fair here. My French is, I don't know what one would call it, high school French, basically, of now 30 years ago, well, less than 30 years ago, but some time frame like that. So yeah, the English translation is proving very useful as well. So I'm periodically going through this last night, reading about this fellow. The medals are winding their way from the UK to me here, so they haven't actually arrived here yet. But it's interesting how this thing has provided an amazing distraction from my current thinking, from the current situation. It's given me at least an evening's worth of, and I've only known about these medals for kind of half a day, Saturday, basically. So, yeah, it's just fascinating that this person who lived 200 years ago still has a vibrancy and a currency in terms of kind of resurrecting his life, or at least his writings about his life, and thinking about what these awards mean. Now, the medal collection isn't complete. It's just 7 medals. But still, a medal from the Battle of Waterloo is not something to be sniffed at. And what's striking here is actually the gift I got my wife was substantially reduced. It was about a third the price. And these also, I think, are distressed. I mean, in terms of, how my wife picked them up. So, yeah, it's a very strange period that obviously folks that might be holding these things would be wanting to get rid of them at a reduced price. But I, for one, am certainly going to cherish these things and revere the history associated with them. And it's a very strange thing to change my thinking about this period of time. I mean, I think the Franco-Prussian War is more up my alley than Napoleonics, just in terms of some of the strategy and some of the, behaviors, and moving very much into what I would call, the modern methods of warfare. But it's interesting to think of this person as they wander their way through. I'm yet to translate most of the political intrigue. The movement from Leopold I to Leopold II, the actual creation of the Belgian state, is an interesting period as well. So I'm looking forward to discovering more of these translations and going through that accordingly. But sometimes it's nice to have something else come into one's life. And that's certainly the way I'm feeling about this thing currently. I mean, the whole nature of this current period of time seems to lend itself very heavily to just a kind of reflection associated with where we sit in a much broader history of things. So I hope this has left you with some food for thought, perhaps about expanding your historical interests, perhaps about discovering a historical figure and using it to motivate your own reading, learning, and perhaps even game playing through this. So I will return to a more traditional My Rules Are Better in coming weeks, but please do bear in mind that the new normal, let us say, for me, is not giving me as much free time as I would necessarily want. That may change. Certainly what is going on currently is more a reaction to what has happened so far. I think we have probably another 2, maybe even 3 months of what we see currently. Certainly, it's hard to complain about being overworked currently, particularly for those that don't have work. But it is a rather strange phenomena that here I find myself talking about a lieutenant general from 200 years ago and reflecting on how little time I've had to actually get my podcasting room in order to form and film video footage. I have a slightly modified rule set for Just Plain Chaos, based in large part on the computer simulation feedback. And I think the first videos I will do, I've got a bunker system and some other things, will be to get out the Just Plain Chaos figures and fight through some scenarios, talking about the changes of rules based on the computer simulation. That, I think, might make an interesting video. Tom Barbalet in the Bay Area, signing out.